Hello everybody, this is Manues, back with another Eternal Top Decks here on EternalTitans.com, and today it's time to talk about the Combrei Aggro deck that my team and I have been tearing up the ladder and ETS the last couple of days. The deck has been come up with by Kamado and tuned a bunch by me and the rest of the team, so I'll jump right in, show you the list, talk about the list and how it evolved, and where we are at the moment. Alright, so this is the deck. Like I said, Kamado is the one that came up with the deck. Combrei Aggro as a general concept is nothing new. I had a Combrei Aggro deck when Dead Reckoning came out, as you might have remember, although it looked a bit different. It also wasn't as good as this one. I also tried some Combrei Aggro with Vanquish's Blade and stuff when the latest set came out, but the approach that I tried just didn't feel very good. Deck felt underpowered. Might have also had to do with what the metagame looked like at the time, so I just kind of gave up and wrote off the archetype as a whole because it just felt kind of like, yeah, flawed and underpowered, and felt like the colors just don't have the tools for this type of archetype. So didn't really look into it much more. With Genetrix I messed around with some ideas, but it was more like a obelisk Combrei style deck that seemed okay but not great, and also didn't feel that good. So that was also not the right direction, so I kind of just gave up on the whole thing. But yeah, Kamado has been messing around with this and found out a couple of good things that basically made the deck work and feel right. Like, for example, focusing on the 4 healths, 3 drops, Record Keeper and Siraf more so, and less so on evasion, because the flyers have 3 healths usually, making them a lot more vulnerable against Hailstorm, making your control matchup much worse. Also potentially being a slightly slower clock, since Record Keeper actually hits pretty hard, and evasion not being that important right now or in the archetype in general due to some things that change, like Sword of Unity providing overwhelm and stuff. So yeah, the list that he posted and brought up was a bit different though. He had Time Merchant. He said he most of the time played with Justice Merchant first and then tried Time Merchant, and wasn't sure which one he likes better, or if it's maybe even better to not run Merchant. He had like less Genetrix and wasn't sure if he liked the amount he had, and might even wanted to go down to 2. He had 3 at the time. And yeah, he had Sandstorm Titan still and significantly less power. Like, there were like 3 stand togethers and 4 vanquishes, and I think like 27 to 28 power depending on the version. I think the version he posted with the Time Merchant said 27. So yeah, I tried the deck out. Initially I was pretty underwhelmed when he posted it. It was like, yeah, I tried similar stuff, didn't like it, felt crappy, but then I just gave it a try. Figured, yeah, there's some sense to what he's saying, and there are some differences to what I tried, so might as well give it a try. And I was quickly noticing that it is quite strong and feels really good after my initial skepticism, because I just tried similar things that had some yeah, subtle but important differences, making the deck feel and perform much worse. So yeah, after that I basically just started changing the deck. When I tried the deck, the first thing I did was cutting the merchants, because Justice Merchant is awful, so that was off the table. Also the market is not great for Justice. The point is, Time Merchant is great, but you really don't want a 1-4 in this deck, unlike the LSE Combrei deck, which was not an aggro deck and more of a like mid-range deck that can go over with the LSEs and Wandering Wisps and rebuying killers. This deck doesn't have that playstyle, so you're a real aggro deck. Bit bigger and a bit slower than say fire aggro decks, but you are an aggro deck. Your plan is to curve out and beat down. And playing a 1-4 for 3 power is not doing that. So Not a big fan. Also, I looked at the market. The market really just didn't give you anything special. The market mostly just gave you more swords and more stand-togethers and like some minor utility, nothing major really. So that's basically how I decide whether or not I like a market in more proactive decks. I look at the market and see if the market gives me enough unique things that solve potential issues that a deck could run into. And in this case it just didn't. It's a body that I wouldn't want anywhere near my aggressive deck, and just some more virtual copies of some either powerful or situational cards. So I decided I'm not gonna run Merchant. Also Kamado only had 3 Record Keeper, and the more I thought about his argument with the 4 health and looking at the format with Hailstorm and stuff with Tempo, it was clear I just wanted like the full Record Keeper. So I just like added up the numbers, added the Force Genetrix, added the Force Record Keeper, that sort of stuff, the Force Sword of course, and some more power to make the deck just well-rounded and consistent and curve out smoothly. I had 28 power initially and played it a bunch, and yeah, I noticed that 28 power is like the bare minimum that I want. He even wanted to potentially go down to 27, something that I definitely wasn't interested in, because Crownwatch tactic is actually a fully legit card. The deck would probably put at least like 2 Crownwatch tactics in the deck if they were just spells, not power, and the fact that they are power and a spell is an upside, not a downside. So there is a point to be made to even play 4, but you can't play 4 and say 28 power, because then your power base is going to be super clunky. Your percentage of depleted power is way too high, and it's just going to cripple your draws. It's also going to make your seats worse. It's just a nightmare. So we played a bunch, and I was like, I'm open to like going up to 29, and talked about it with Grimfan. He said like most of his losses were to like power issues, so he likes the idea. So we decided we could shave say a stand together maybe for power, and I was like, honestly, if I could, I would probably like run at least 30 and just jam 4 standards, because the card is really good in the deck and also makes the deck more consistent. The deck happily hits at least 6 power on curve for sword and so on, and the standards are legit good cards as power and as spell, unlike say old monuments, which are kind of like okay as units but not great. And then yeah, the other thing that I noticed quickly is that I was about as happy with Titan as I expected, which was not that much. Like, it's decent, but Titan is just not a great aggressive unit. It has more defensive slanted features like higher health and attack, the endurance and stuff, and doesn't bring any additional things to the table that aggro decks were looking for, like some sort of evasion, say overwhelm or flying, that sort of stuff, quick draw, even Aegis to be more durable, or at least being multi-faction to not die to as much removal as some other cards. So yeah, people often think, yeah, Titan is big, that makes it a good card in aggro by default, but it isn't. Like Sheriff Marley or Copper Hall Elite are much better, because the Aegis means you can curve out much better against sweepers, against control, which is pretty critical. You can also have better targets for combat tricks, Genetrix, Irel buff, and relic weapons like swords, so they cannot blow you out in response to the spellcraft and stuff like that. So while the stats are smaller on these 4 drops, they're actually much better aggro cards because of the other features they have. We weren't sure which one we like better. Initially we were attracted to Elite by the super easy cost and the overwhelm, which is why the team ran Elite in the ETS. But the more I thought about it, I felt like the overwhelm probably doesn't matter as much, because we have Enforcer and Siraf already on curve to curve them into Genetrix, and buff, and we also have the sword, which we're usually going to put on the unit buffed by Genetrix the turn after anyway, so there's like one non-overwhelm attack sometimes. So the overwhelm of Elite isn't worth that much, and the deck gets in a bunch of situations where Sheriff Marley's Tribute actually comes up, which is really, really powerful if it comes up. So even if it only comes up a couple of times, it quickly makes up for the overwhelm on Elite. The fact that Elite is multi-faction doesn't matter as much thanks to the Aegis. And Annihilate still having some targets in the deck anyway. So without the Aegis, the multi-faction aspect of Elite would actually matter more. But since both have Aegis, it doesn't matter as much. And yeah, then there's obviously the activated ability of Marley, which actually also matters quite a bunch against control. And they already won me a game or two here and there that I might have not won otherwise. So I started trying Sheriff Marley, and by now I'm pretty confident that Marley is the 4-drop you want over Titan and Elite. And yeah, the rest of the units just like straightforward curve. Initiative Descent, great in the deck with sort of Unity and the bunch of 3 and 4 drops to curve into, or playing an on-curve unit and having 1 power open for Finest Hour is also great. Then the 2 of the strongest 2 drops in the game, Awakened Student and Teacher, both really good units that can attack on most boards early on due to being 3/3 or bigger. That's a big upside over, say, Fire Aggro. One of the biggest issues with Fire Aggro decks usually is the sizing. Like, most of your cards these days get outsized by what is happening on the other side of the board, so you can often not attack without a removal or a combat trick. So every time you don't have one, you kind of like put to a grinding halt, which is a really big problem, and one of the issues with Fire Aggro in all its flavors. Skycrack is the best at mitigating that, partially because they have a 2-drop like Champion of Fury, but all in all, that's a big problem and a big upside of Combrei, that they don't have that. And then if the units start getting bigger, you have your Finest Hour to still punch through. Like, your 2-drops with a Finest Hour still even beat a Sandstorm Titan. Another thing that doesn't happen with Fire Aggro decks, they get stalled out massively by big units like Titan, especially Titan with the Endurance, and their combat tricks and their initial sizing usually lead to like 4 or 5 attack against the thick hells, while here we have a 6 or 7 attack against thick hells, which is a big difference. And then yeah, we have the Record Keeper and the Siraf and the Enforcer. Record Keeper and Siraf are the primary 3-drops. Having 4 health is a big deal. You can curve 2-drop into Record Keeper, and then the Hailstorms is 3-cost removal on a 2-drop, which is really bad. And if it's a student, they only have 1 turn window even to do so, because the next turn it becomes a 4/4 a lot of the time. Siraf's Overwhelm is really nice for Genetrix, and with Genetrix Initiate and the amount of power, the deck is actually quite good at ramping into Siraf activations and just activating Siraf against other time decks to beat them that way when they start clogging up the board. So she is once again back to her old stellar self in this deck, being a great body on turn 3 and also being a great alternate win condition later on. Another reason why running a higher amount of power is actually quite beneficial. It makes the deck more consistent, allows for more standards, and gives you a reliable alternate plan with Siraf. Enforcer is just a great card. It's another way to deal with some issues. Evasive option when the ground is being clogged up, and also helps against opposing flyers, which when you get on defense. Yeah, Genetrix Irel is kind of like a slightly worse charge unit, but since charge is amazing, Genetrix is like the next best thing. I definitely underrated the card when it came out, but this is the kind of deck that I had in mind that I could mainly see her in this style of deck. I just at the time didn't think there is a good deck like this, but Kamado has proven us differently. And yeah, so basically usually she comes down, you have at least one big swing that forces the opponent to jump or take a big hit, and then a bunch of the time they'll deal with Genetrix or the unit you buffed next turn. which is unfortunate, but it's kind of the same as if, I don't know, you play a charge unit, hit them once, and then they kill the charge unit. It's not that big of a deal. And every time Genetrix lives, the opponent is just like in big trouble. Especially also because a ramp ability comes in really handy between Siraf, Sheriff Marley's activations, and Sword of Unity, and also helping to turn your Crownwatch standards into spells prematurely. And yeah, the 2/2 body is not great, but still does stuff. Like on empty boards against control, it still attacks. Against aggro, it blocks like 1 attack units, and once you play your sword or your stand together, a 3/3 actually blocks a fair share of aggro units. Sorry about that, my phone is blowing up for whatever reason. Let me turn that off. Awful. Sorry. Should mute my phone. Muted my browser, but not my phone. So where was I? Yeah, Genetrix just doing a bunch of stuff, and like a 3/3 Genetrix blocks pretty well against aggro. And then yeah, Sword of Unity, one of the main cards that makes this deck a powerhouse. Sword of Unity, just one of the best cards in the game right now, if you ask me, and the reason why Combrei decks are so strong. Be it big Combrei, be it the LSE Combrei that kind of fallen out of favor since the safe return nerf hit the core strategy of the deck too hard, or in this kind of Combrei Aggro, the card is just dominating. It's great against control, great against aggro, even great against midrange, just an amazing card. 4 Finest Hour, still the best and most playable combat trick in Constructed. 3 Vanquish, we cut the Force Vanquish to fit the Force Crownwatch standard. This is the one thing that's a bit close, because big time decks like big Combrei can be a bit problematic. So having a Force Vanquish there is nice, but it's not great against most other decks. Even some of the decks where you have targets, because the combat tricks often do the same. And then Crownwatch standard is better because it gains you health, because it can be a power when you need the power, and so on. So in most cases standard is better, which is why we leaned towards it. You also don't have a merchant to get rid of Vanquish against control, while standard deals 3 damage, and so on. But yeah, I can see if you're struggling with too many bigger time decks to try and fit that Force Vanquish again, maybe at the cost of the Force Crownwatch standard, but at this point I wouldn't go below 29 power for sure. And then we have to stand together. Card is pretty so-so. It's not great, it's kind of situational, kind of clunky, but it's a great tool against control, so having a couple extras in addition to the sword is nice and can make the difference between winning and losing, which is why there is still 2. But yeah, we already have Sheriff Marley, Sword of Unity, Teacher, and a bunch of Hailstorm immune threats, and Finest Hour even against the for the units that Hailstorm might kill to keep momentum, and Genetrix as like pseudo charge. So the control matchup is going really well. Then we have the power base, basically 23 time, 21 justice. Deck has up to 15 turn 1 time sources, including the Seeds of Progress, if you have a Justice Sigil in hand as well, because if you have another time source in hand, it doesn't really matter. So the Seeds don't always help with your turn 1 time, since you only have 3 non-time sources that help get your Seeds ready. That's something to keep in mind here, that actually your Seeds kind of a lot of the time will be useful turn 1 because you already have another ready time source. So yeah, there's like 11 guaranteed turn 1 time sources, and then some lower percentage chances of Seeds. Deck is quite power hungry. 30 power might seem a lot for a deck mostly stopping at 4, but the deck doesn't really stop at 4, because Sword of Unity is a 6 drop, so you want to get to 6. You have Siraf, you have Awakened Student, and you're effectively only running like 26 power, because the Crownwatch standards are more there for the Crownwatch tactic than for the standard. They're just like there for the standard as well, to make sure that you have power when you need it. but you're trying to avoid playing it for power if you don't have to, because they're pretty good spells. Yeah, that's the deck. Deck is amazing. I'm currently in rank 5. I'm destroying ladder with it. This might be the best deck that I've played in a long time. Just goes like a hot knife through butter on ladder right now. I think I'm like 37-9 over the first 46 games. That is incredible. I don't remember when I last did this well. I had like 1 or 2 other decks recently that did similarly well, but not this well. Like one level below. They still did really good, like high 70s in 40, 50, 60 games, and also feeling really good, not just kind of like lucky and hot streaking. And this one just like feels even a notch better, and it's just like crushing people left and right, and seems to not have any blatant weaknesses. Like one of the bigger weaknesses that I noticed seems to be like big Combrei can be pretty tough, but aside from that, most matchups felt pretty good or even great so far. But sample size is pretty small. Some matchups you barely played, so don't want to get too deep into matchups with a deck that is not long-term tested enough in specific matchups to say anything specific about the matchup. But yeah, so far I haven't run into too much resistance, even from like other people in like the top 10, top 20, which is a really good sign. So yeah, as usual, gonna hop into some games with the deck, show it in action. Let's see how close we can get to rank 1 from 5 over the next 4 games. And as usual, if you enjoy the content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notification icons. Leave a comment, leave a like, check my social media, and stream if you want to catch me live and not miss out on any future updates. And yeah, please consider whitelisting EternalTitans.com and YouTube to support this content. See you in a moment with game number 1. Thanks for watching.